Week 1 features a rivalry matchup in the Swamp. Should be a good showdown for the first middle of the day SEC on ABC game. Hi guys, welcome back to the College Sports Superfan. Today we're going to talk about number 19 Miami on the road against the Florida Gators and what to expect from that rivalry matchup. So first off, the Florida Gators have the number 1 rated most difficult schedule in all of college football this season. Now it's always tricky to play in the SEC, but sometimes you just get luckier than other times. Sometimes you just end up unlucky, and especially in the fact that there's no divisions in the SEC anymore. Now that creates all kinds of nuance, like Texas, for instance. Texas in their first season in the SEC, they ended up with a very favorable SEC schedule. They get to play Vanderbilt, who's the worst team in the conference, arguably Mississippi State, second worst team, and Arkansas, the third worst team, and Florida, who might not be that great this season. All part of their SEC slate. And yes, they have to play Georgia as well, but overall, Texas really lucked out with their schedule. Florida, the exact opposite. You look at their schedule, especially as you get a little bit later into the year, it's one top 15 team after another top 15 team. I think there's a stretch. Their last 5 games are essentially top 20 or top 15 teams in every single matchup, and they're likely to lose every single matchup. That being said, if Billy Napier wants to keep his job and Florida wants to have a winning season, they have to dominate the beginning of the season, and that includes having to beat Miami. This game to the Florida Gators is more important to them than it is to Miami, because you look at Miami's schedule the rest of the year, it's going to be a lot easier. Not a whole lot of ranked opponents on Miami's schedule. Their schedule, if they can beat the Florida Gators on the road in week 1, their schedule lines up really, really well for them to either have 9 or 10 wins in the regular season. So the Hurricanes could actually be a playoff contender this year, just based on the fact, not just that they have talent, but also based on the fact that their schedule lines up really, really nicely, especially if Florida State, after we saw them lose to Georgia Tech, especially if Florida State drops off a little bit. That being said, though, Miami does have to go on the road to play Georgia Tech, who they lost to at home last season. We'll get to more of that later on in the year. For now, let's talk about this matchup. Cam Ward, most highly touted transfer prospect in this year's transfer pool after what he did with Washington State and then Incarnate Word before that, transfers to Miami after thinking about going to the NFL. He was right on the cusp of that and thought, you know what? I'm going to go play for a big-time program for just one more year, really prove myself, and then get to be a higher NFL prospect. So he chooses the Miami Hurricanes. Damian Martinez, who was the top-tier star with Oregon State, transfers to Miami, so the fall of the Pac-12 really benefited the Miami Hurricanes in this one, as Martinez is in at running back. Also, they have another good running back in Mark Fletcher, and then the receiver core, oh my gosh, is so good for Cam Ward. Xavier Restrepo, Isaiah Horton, and Jacoby George are just a few of the fantastic wide receivers that Miami has. On defense, they've got some great pass rushers like Ruben Bain and Francisco Mauigoa, who are going to create havoc. Plus, they got a great kicker in Andreas Borregales. So overall, Miami actually has a really good squad top to bottom. I think they're a little bit better than their number 19 ranking suggests. It's just people are kind of nervous because they've said, okay, Miami's back, Miami's going to be really good, and then they don't quite deliver. Just like how Texas was treated for several years. But I truly believe Miami might actually have a really good squad, top to bottom, offense, defense, everything's coming together. Just comes down to Mario Cristobal's coaching, which has been questionable between Oregon and now. I felt like he's always been an elite level recruiter. There's no doubt about it. He's always assembled really great teams. But for whatever reason, with the Oregon Ducks and now with the Miami Hurricanes, there's just a couple games on the schedule that they're supposed to win, and they always find a way to lose. The Georgia Tech game was a great example where they should have just kneeled the ball and end up losing the game. Perfect example of that. When he was coaching Oregon, with Justin Herbert and all these great players, they went on the road and lost to Arizona State, which had a mediocre team, and that kept him out of the college football playoff. So again, Cristobal always finds a way to lose a couple of games he really shouldn't, but maybe, just maybe this year, he won't end up doing that. Let's talk about the Florida Gators here, who could be in for a rough season. Again, I said their schedule is really tough. It's not just their SEC schedule, which is really difficult this year, but their non-conference slate. Again, they play Miami here. They also play University of Central Florida, who's not a bad team at all. The only easy opponent Florida has their entire season is a home game against Samford, an FCS opponent, right after this Miami game. So in week 2, that's Florida's only super easy game. Most teams at this level have like 2 or 3 of those kinds of games. So Florida, they got a super tough schedule. Let's talk about their team though. Graham Mertz returns at quarterback. This is kind of his last chance to really prove himself. He was a highly touted recruit, had a great start at Wisconsin in the COVID year, and then it all fell apart after that, and he just hasn't been able to get it together since. But he played an entire season last year as the starter for Florida, so he should ideally be a lot better. However, there is a super highly talented freshman quarterback, DJ Lagway, that is just right behind him. So if he does start to screw up early, we may see DJ in at some point this season. Montrell Johnson returns as the star running back. He's got lots and lots of starting experience between Louisiana Lafayette and Florida. He understands Billy Napier's system extremely well by this point, so Johnson could have a big year. Eugene Wilson also returns as a wide receiver, and then they also brought in Chimere Dike from Wisconsin. He could be a great wide receiver threat. So the receiving core, ideally for Graham Mertz, should be better this season. The secondary for Florida should also be fantastic. They got Jason Marshall, who could be an NFL draft pick, should be very high. Cormani McLean also could be an NFL draft pick. So they're going to shut down the pass pretty well, ideally on a lot of teams that are going to be pass heavy. Well, let's talk about this history of this rivalry, why it's so important, then I'll say who I think is going to end up winning this game. This is a very close rivalry. It's not played a huge amount, not like Florida and Florida State or Miami and Florida State. This is kind of like the next tier down. Miami leads the all-time rivalry series 29-27. Very, very close. There have been some iconic classic games in this rivalry, like in 1971. This is the game known as the Gator Flop, where basically all the Florida Gators defenders all fell down in unison to allow Miami to score a touchdown on purpose, just so that they could put their quarterback back in on offense and break a passing record. So he just needed 14 yards. And they had almost no time left, so they said, okay, the only way he's going to break this record is if Miami scores, and then we can get back on the ball and throw a 15-yard pass. They do. He gets the record. Miami was not very happy about that at all, that Florida just all fell down and let them score, and the head coach at the time claimed that he had no idea the defense was going to do that, and you'll never know whether that was the case. The other big moments in this rivalry, Florida defeated Miami 28-3 in Gainesville in 1983. Miami Hurricanes went on to go undefeated the rest of the season and win the national championship. So just kind of an interesting thing there. And in 2003, one of the best games of the rivalry series, Miami came back to win 38-33 after being down 33-10 in the second half, where Brock Berlin, who played for the Florida Gators, transferred to Miami, and he had 2 interceptions in the first half, played really, really terrible. The Gators got out to that 33-10 lead, but Brock Berlin just got better as the game went on. They're on the road in Gainesville. He leads them to a comeback, and Miami wins 38-33, and he does the Gator chomp on them as well. So there's a lot of animosity in this rivalry. It is heated, even though it's not the same as Miami versus Florida State or Florida versus Florida State. And they used to play for a giant trophy called the Seminole War Canoe, which was actually gifted to them by members of the Seminole tribe. But they no longer play for that trophy anymore. It's now just on display in a museum in Miami in their Sports Hall of Fame. So who do I think is going to win this game here? Well, ultimately, yes, Florida's got a tough schedule. Ultimately, I think they're not even that great of a team, to be honest, to begin with. I think the Gators are going to be in for a really, really rough season, and this might be it for Billy Napier. If he was going to keep his job, he absolutely needs to win this game. Unfortunately for him, I think Miami ends up winning this game by 14. I like their odds. I know the Swamp's going to be rocking, but this team to me is very deep, very talented, tons of veteran experience. There's no reason for me to believe that Miami should lose this game. All right, thank you guys so much. You're listening to the College Sports Super Fan. I've got more videos coming out for week 1 here, and this is going to be one exciting week. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please like and subscribe.